Neither of those people are us. How are you doing today, Darrel?
I'm doing super. I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited to be here.
All right, let's go.
I think the last time I was
Hello and welcome to Talk Heathen. Today is October 25th, 2020, Season 4, Episode 43. I'm Bianca, and with me today,
Darrel Ray.
Hello, Darrel. Welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been too long. I think it was back in January or February. I was actually in the studio before COVID hit.
Yes, I remember. I miss the studio.
I do too, especially the food.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So, although I'm having real barbecue, Kansas City barbecue today.
Real barbecue, huh?
Thank you, ACA. Yes. None of that Texas stuff.
None of that. Oh God. All right, guys. This is it. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, as you all know. That means we run on donations. That also means that if you look up in the live chat, you will see that you have the option to donate directly to the ACA, and YouTube gives us 100% of those proceedings. So if you would like to donate there or Patreon, we do thank our top 5 patrons about 2/3 of the way through the episode. So if you would like your name read on air, we refresh the page right before. So consider donating to us. We know most of you probably are saving a buttload of money, not tithing. So this is your Sunday service. Come on, give it a little bit. Also, I do want to make note, while we are a nonprofit and cannot officially endorse anybody to any elected office, we can encourage you to vote. So please get out there and vote. If you already are registered and if you have the option to mail in your ballot, please make sure those are done. If you need to stand in line, I'm going to be standing in line. So we're right there with you. Please vote. A couple of announcements before we jump in today. And I know, Darrel, you have some awesome stuff you want to share with us before we jump into calls. Nonprofits are back officially. So this is not a Discord conversation. This is an actual show that they are putting together. They are going to be on at 3 p.m. Central, so right after this. So if you would like to check them out, that YouTube link is in the lower third. And also, we got some really sad news this last week. The amazing James Randi, has passed away. So today's show officially is dedicated to him. And we can only hope he's harassing a bunch of psychics right now or something. All right. Darrel, welcome to the show. I know that you wanted to be on and kind of talk about some stuff.
Right. I have already voted, by the way. I was
good.
Got there, and I was kind of surprised how long the line was on a Thursday afternoon for voting, which bodes well for getting out. But yes, I want people to vote. I wanted to talk about something I think is kind of pervading our system, our culture, and our political structure right now, that I don't see people really understanding or putting 2 and 2 together, so to speak. I'm not saying people don't know history, but I do want to talk about history a little bit in a different angle. And let's go back to the founding of our republic. And we can just say that from the very beginning, slavery was an issue. Slavery was not even questioned, and Christianity was right here with it. And going even farther back with the explorers of North and South America from Spain, Christianity was right there, killing people, enslaving people, giving diseases. And in my book, The God Virus, I even talk about how diseases work with religions, which we're seeing right now with churches having COVID spreading events, basically.
Yep.
So that's all the background. This nation was founded on white supremacy. And that's what I want to talk about today. And when you understand how deeply it's embedded in our culture and in even our legal structure, it frames something that's important this November for election day. Let's start kind of with the Civil War. The Civil War had unfinished business, in my estimation. And interrupt me here anytime.
Yeah,
if you've got some. I'll preach on if you're not careful.
Watching the clock.
But why would millions of people go to war in 1861, men and with support of women and put their lives on the line, except as an ideology. And that ideology was white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
There was an ideology that was embedded in Southern culture. And what I want to say is that that ideology did not die with the Civil War. And in fact, the Civil War was a war about white supremacy. And you know, to various degrees, every component of that war dealt with the notion that whites are superior to all other groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I hesitate even to use the word race because I don't think there's much of a, well, we'll go. That's another thing.
That's another show.
But what happened after the Civil War was that the white supremacy simply reorganized itself, brought in the Ku Klux Klan, brought in other kinds of voter suppression, which we're seeing today.
Yeah,
voter suppression for a period of time right after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, until it was stabbed in the back. Blacks actually voted to such a degree that they were electing non-whites, blacks to office, even congressmen and
at one point there were 20 to 30 black congressmen right after the Civil War. Yeah,
and some senators, which which hasn't happened since Jim Crow got started and the Ku Klux Klan intimidated and all that. So fast forward to today, or in recent time, and there are people out there that so strongly believe this, that they are taking on the cause of the statues of Robert E. Lee and those kinds of people.
Yeah.
And they're not admitting that Robert E. Lee was a traitor to this country. He took an oath of office when he joined the United States Army, when he went through West Point, and he violated that oath of office by siding with the South. Why are we putting statues up to traitors?
Mm-hmm.
Unless there's an ideology that supersedes that, and that's the ideology of white supremacy.
Exactly.
And what we see today, that there are people in our culture right now that would easily go back to that time and place, and they think they'll do anything to make sure white supremacy rules this land. I wanted to talk a little bit about that, and I want you to know that no matter what party it is or who the people running, if they can't disavow white supremacy and all the ramifications it brings into our culture, then they are behaving exactly like Robert E. Lee, because that's what Robert E. Lee espoused. That's what all the generals, I mean, look at all the generals that got statues put up. We weren't
I grew up in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I grew up surrounded by that.
Oh my gosh, yes, right.
Yeah.
And a lot of those statues went up during Jim Crow. They didn't grow up right after the Civil War. They went up later when the myth of the lost cause came in.
Right.
And there's just so many myths and so much we have to deconstruct today. And one of those things, and most important, is right now, we have to challenge white supremacy. We have to challenge it every place it shows its ugly head in this culture. And the place to do it at this moment is go vote.
Yes.
You can get out and march. You can get out and give money. You can do whatever you want. But the most important thing is get out and vote against those people who do not and will not disavow the white supremacy that this entire country was founded on.
I fully agree with that.
That's my sermon for today.
I love it. I love it. This is the kind of sermon I'm about on Sunday.
All right. Good.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing, Darrel. I'm right there with you. Guys, get out and vote. We know that not all of you are stoked about, the options on the ticket right now, and I feel that. But think about it this way. We're picking our desired opponent here. We're picking the person that we want to go up against for the next 4 years, and we've seen how it's worked out with the person currently in office. So keep that in mind. All right. So we are going to jump into some calls. I do want to remind everybody, we do have a couple open lines. And the sooner you call in, the longer conversation we can have with you. If you call in the last half of the show, we're going to need to cycle through some calls pretty quick. So if you'd like to give us a call, that is 512-991-9242. Or if you're not from the U.S. and you don't want to pay for waiting on the line, you can give us a call at tiny.cc/callth, and we will put you right through and you'll talk to our call screeners. All right. Let's jump in and start with Caitlin. Caitlin would like to talk specifically to you, Darrel, about studying psychology.
All right. What's your question, Caitlin?
Hi, good morning, Dr. Ray. It's a pleasure to be on here. My name is Caitlin, and I'm currently studying psychology, and I aspire to be a psychologist. And while I've been studying, I've come across so it'll show like happiness and what kind of people are happier. And one of the things that I first noticed was it said churchgoers and people who have spiritual beliefs. These people are typically happier than opposed to non-churchgoers, those who don't have spiritual beliefs. And I was curious because I'm very early in my studies. What if there's a way for us as atheists to be able to tap into like that happiness, and also you, Dr. Ray, after your years of studying psychology, do you know if there's like any studies that have shown that it is indeed going to church, it is indeed spirituality, or are we leaving out some factors? Because I feel like atheists are often kind of a second thought whenever it comes to studying this.
That's an excellent question, Caitlin. And it's been a question that's actually been researched pretty well in the last 4 or 5 years. There's several studies out there right now that seem to show that there's intervening variables. It's not spirituality. It's not going to church. It's community. And people, so if you look at the research, you'll see that people on one end of the spectrum are happy. People in the middle of the spectrum are not as happy. And people on the other end of the spectrum are happy. So if you're very religious and you go to church every Sunday, you're probably happy. If you're not religious, but you go to Sunday Assembly or you go to Oasis or some other group that you feel community with, you're happy. It's the group in the middle that has no community or has serious doubts about what they're doing in church, but they still go. Those are the people that the research shows are the least happy. Now, we also have to throw another component in there, and that's genetics. There is some clear evidence that some people are more predisposed towards optimism and other are more predisposed towards pessimism, those kinds of things. So there's more than just do you have community, but community seems to be the most important variable that early, and by the way, a lot of it was sponsored by organizations like the Barna Group that's evangelical Christian. Of course, they're going to find their religion helps everybody. So yeah, does that answer your question a little bit?
It does, but I think my other kind of like it's besides the happiness. I was reading also about like those who have hope, like make quicker recoveries from like traumatic events and what have you. And I think that's like kind of the other portion of it that was interesting to me, because atheists, which all of us kind of vary, I find hope in just kind of the in the way that faith has been described on the show a few times is like having no good reason to believe that it is, but you're going to believe it anyway. That's like kind of my hope, you know. I have hope even if there's no good reason. But some atheists, I've learnn like they might not have that because if there's no evidence for it, then why believe it, you know?
Well, you're actually hitting on another variable. These things are not straightforward. They're not simple. We're biological creatures with a neurology that is influenced by our environment, by our social structure, by our raising. There's lots of variables here. And to boil it all down to, do you have a spiritual belief or do you believe in a given God? or do you go to church? That's kind of simplistic, and that's what the research is finding. However, there are resilience factors, and what you mentioned was probably related to the concept of resilience factors. If you are surrounded by a community, if you feel secure in your relationships, that is a resilience factor against trauma or against depression, against things that the kind of the things you mentioned. Hope. I'm more likely to be hopeful if I feel secure in the relationships around me. I'm more likely to feel despair or even depression if I don't have good, positive, supportive relationships around me. And that's not to say we don't go through hard times and get knocked down, but I can get back up a lot quicker when I got 5 friends I can pick up the phone and call. Or I can go sleep over at their house if I need to. That makes for resilience. And that's what you're talking about, picking themselves up and moving on. It's much more related to relationships, which we're humans. We have to have relationships to be happy. That's pretty much the bottom line.
Also,
Kayla, these are good. These are all good questions.
Oh, yes, for sure. They've done some studies as well about how prayer might affect recovery. And it actually turned out, if I'm remembering correctly, that a lot of the people who knew that they were being prayed for recovery actually recovered slower because of the pressure that they felt to recover faster because they wanted to prove that the prayers were working. So there are so many factors here, as Darrel said. We can break any one of these down into at least 5 different components. So,
right.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard of the prayer slowing down recovery. I haven't myself done research into it yet. I don't think I am quite trained enough to be able to do the research for it. But I thought that was interesting because I remember as a Christian, I like hearing me being prayed for. Whenever I was like recovering for something. It made me feel loved, if that makes sense, and so it kind of tapped into the community. So I feel like it's just there's so much research to be done in these kind of things, which is why I'm so happy y'all took my call. And
where are you in your studies?
So I am currently working on my bachelor's degree. I got 6 more classes to go, and then I plan on applying for a commission in the Air Force and becoming a psychologist that way, or finding a way.
Okay.
In Jurassic Park, that one quote, "Life finds a way, I will find a way."
Good. I like your determination.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Caitlin. I appreciate you.
Can I put one plug in before she goes?
Of course. Go for it.
Once you get your degree, hopefully you get it in some really good evidence-based psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness, that sort of stuff. And then come back and apply to a secular therapy project to become a therapist with us. We need more therapists.
Oh, there you go.
We have 461.
I do want to do that. Is there a way for me to volunteer for that, like as I am now?
Yes. And the answer is yes. Go to recoveringfromreligion.org, hit the volunteer button, and you will get trained in how to chat with people in desperate need as they leave religion. You'll get a really good experience. And I guarantee you the basic training we give you will be almost identical to the training you'll get early in your clinical training once you get into graduate school.
Oh, really?
I guarantee it. Yes. We train our agents very carefully. RFR, recoveringfromreligion.org, hit the volunteer button and come through, and we'll see you on the other side, maybe.
And I was reading up on that, and it looked like you were either the founder or one of the founders.
I am the founder.
Yeah,
but there are
200
people working on it, so it's not me.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for founding that wonderful organization. Again, thank you both for taking my call.
Yes.
For sure. Thank you so much for giving us an opportunity to plug Dr. Ray's stuff. And good luck graduating, Caitlin.
My pleasure.
Bye.
All right. Y'all have a wonderful day.
You too. All right. That's a good way to kick off the episode, I think.
Excellent. Excellent.
All right. So we do have a theist on the line. So we're going to jump into that. But if you are a theist and you want to talk about anything, especially related to psychology, related maybe to a study you read and maybe didn't understand, or something that influenced your belief, this is a really good week to call in. So give us a call. In the meantime, let's talk to RJ in Colorado. RJ, hello. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. So basically, my argument was that if you look at man-made structures, the oldest tree and human demographics, all of them point to a young Earth versus the evolutionist viewpoint. And I'll see how you guys will.
Yeah, let's jump in with the caveat here that I am not a biologist, and as smart and accomplished as Dr. Darrel Ray is, I do not believe biology and evolution are his forte. We will try to talk about this in an informed way, but also I would encourage, I will make the case here that you need to be ready to offer an alternative, because I guarantee you our line of questioning is going to end up being, okay, why do we care and what are you trying to convince us of outside of this claim about evolution? So we'll let you make your case first, and then we'll dive in. So go for it.
Okay. Well, the man-made structures I'll start off with, most of them they center around, now not all of them are in the Middle East, but a lot of them are. And the other ones that aren't kind of center close to the Middle East, like in Egypt, you have the pyramids, and I know Egypt's in Africa, but it is close to the Middle East. And then the society that came afterwards was Greece, and that is also somewhat close to the Middle East. I realize that that's considered part of Europe, but they all kind of center around that Eastern area. And, if you listen to the Bible story, that's where Noah, after the flood, first he landed in Mount Ararat, or the mountains of Ararat, I guess. And that's in modern day Turkey, Syria, around that area.
Okay, so let's break that down first. Yeah. That's an interesting place to start. So thank you for running through that. So I've got a couple comments here. First off, do you know the concept of the Fertile Crescent and the cradle of humanity and civilization, kind of that terminology?
I think I'm a little familiar with that, yeah.
Yeah, so what you're espousing here is kind of common knowledge among people who even, do accept evolution to be true. So I'm not really hearing a opportunity to refute evolution in this statement. I know that it sounds like it might also back up your claim, which is why I want to jump into you believe that the Noah story really happened, that there was a flood and only Noah and his family and a bunch of animals survived it?
Yeah, well, and the fish in the ocean, yeah.
All right, well, leaving the fish in the ocean for now, because that has problems. So my question is, if we're going literally here and saying there's a literal creation in 6 days, I'm assuming, and then a literal flood, and then literally 3 sons, their wives, Noah and his wife, were the ones to repopulate the earth, how do you reconcile how long it would take for that amount of people to create the number of civilizations that we're talking about here in that shortest span of time?
Are you talking about all the way up until today's time? Or
well, no, you're saying, okay, there are ancient structures here, the pyramids in Egypt and, these various cities, these various ruins. Those would need to be constructed by people and within a certain amount of time from 6 people. Correct. So have you done the math there?
I think the story goes it was 8 people.
Okay, 8 people.
So they, right.
Stand.
So, but the thing is, they had kids. They possibly could have had kids while they were on the ark.
Did they say that?
And they had, what's up?
Okay. still, we're reaching.
So
Once a population hits a certain point, it's really, really hard for them to come back from extinction. And 8 people, with or without kids involved, doesn't meet that threshold.
Okay. Well, I'd have to disagree with you on that. I think they had. I mean, I'm just guessing. It doesn't specifically say it, but I would assume. Well, it does say that they had kids. It says, they had like 10. I mean, I don't know the exact number. I think it's like 24 kids after they came off the ark. And
RJ,
back then they didn't have Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wonder.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What do you do with the Chinese civilization that's older than the flood, or what do you do with the Central American civilizations that were well underway before the flood, among other things? What do you do with all those people? Millions and millions of people we know. Where'd they come from?
I haven't heard of the Central American civilization being older than the flood. I have heard cases made about the Chinese being older than the flood, but
of course they are. They're far older than the flood.
Well, Sumer, some people refer to it as Sumeria. The Sumerian society, by most archaeologists, believe that that's older than the Chinese society.
Sumer and Sumeria are two different things, significantly different.
So Sumer.
Yeah. So what I'm asking you is, can you, if I were to say, would you go online or wherever you go to get your information and get some peer-reviewed sources from archaeological studies, and could you make a case? You're not making a case to me because you're not citing any sources.
Right.
You're not an archaeologist. You're not an evolutionary biologist.
Oh.
Evolution is not even the issue here. The evolution is not the issue. Human habitation on this planet is the issue that goes way, way back before any flood.
Well, and see, there's a reason I have an issue with that, because if you do believe in evolution and that we're around 200,000 years, that would mean that it took us like 190,000 years to figure out how to make a man-made structure. I mean, I did do research. I mean, I used Google. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And it does say Turkey has the oldest man-made structure, and it's about 8,000 years old.
Oh, no. Göbekli Tepe is over 12,000 years old. Over 12,000. Göbekli Tepe itself, far older than what you're talking about.
The thing is that is closer to the creation versus evolution, which is 200 or 300,000 years ago.
Well, let's get back to your original question. You made a statement about human habitation, and you haven't even been able to back that up. We don't even need to go to evolution yet, because you can't establish why there's a civilization that's over 12 to 14,000 years old. That's how old Göbekli Tepe is.
They use the carbon dating method, which has a lot of flaws in it.
Oh, but no.
Even if it's...
So do you know how carbon dating works, RJ? Do you even know basic physics? Have you had a course in physics?
Physics? No, I have not. I'll be honest.
You need to go study a little bit about physics, because you do respect the atom bomb, I'm guessing. You do believe that there is such a thing as an atom bomb, right?
Of course.
Okay, so if you can understand that there's an atom bomb that takes advantage of the energy within the atom to create massive amounts of energy to blow up, if you understand that, and then you understand that there's ways to look at atoms that allow us to identify how old something is. We could actually go to Hiroshima, for example, take some of the radioactivity that still exists there and identify exactly or very close to when the bomb went off, even if we didn't know there was a bomb that went off there, because there's a decomposition of atomic structures, and that's all carbon dating is. It's a decomposition. And when you say problems, can you tell me what the problems are? Because you're not a physicist. You don't even know how carbon dating works.
Yeah, the living snails that were carbon dated they're carbon dated 12,000 years old. there was a carbon dating that said living snails were over 12,000 years old. That means that there's a problem with that system.
It means that perhaps the point was that they were using the system in a way that wasn't meant to be used. You can say, I can't cook, I can't make a fire with this hammer, therefore hammers don't work. You're using it wrong.
I mean, it's not a foolproof system.
Where's your source for this so-called finding, and how does that say anything?
The living snails, you can find it online. They tried to say it had something to do with limestone, because there was limestone inside inside the shells. But,
yep.
There's a lot of flaws. I mean, human technology has a flawed way of dating things. It's not always correct.
So human technology is flawed and isn't always correct, but your guesses about anthropological structures are for me, RJ, the problem I'm having here is you call in, you don't cite sources, you say you found it on Google, and yes, valid sources can be found on Google, but if you're making an argument to people and want to convince them, you need to have those actual sources, and you need to make sure you're getting your facts straight. And so far, you've been giving out names, you've been giving out dates that are not right. They're not accurate. And so that's decreasing your credibility a little bit more than it already was. So we're having a little bit of trouble being convinced by this argument. I believe you're convinced by it, but if the point's to convince us, then we might want to change tactics here, or at least have you call back with some actual sources.
Okay. Well, I didn't write down all the sources. I did. I mean, I suppose I could, but I don't think it's necessary.
Why not?
I mean, the other thing is, well,
why is it not necessary to cite your sources?
I suppose I can, but I mean, I was going to go into the other topic too, and that was the human population.
Okay, you've already demonstrated that you don't understand how human population and demographics work if you think that 8 people could repopulate the earth in a couple thousands of years.
Yeah, if you do it on a calculator and even if you times it by 2 over the course of 2,000 years, you get way more than even 8 billion people. So to say that we're older than 200,000 years that's just crazy, in my opinion.
Wait, how did you do this on a calculator? I'm so curious. Keeping in mind that people have, how did this work?
Okay. Well, I did it. I calculated if everyone from 6,000 years ago, if you take 8 people and you times that by 2 every 30 years, I think it's more than enough. It comes up to more than 8 billion people within 2,000 years, actually earlier. And that could explain, the wars, the plagues. I mean, and I would say there was no contraception maybe there was back then. People had a lot more kids than they do now.
Yeah, and a lot of them died.
And yeah, that's true. I mean, there was famine, plague.
Well, wait a minute. You made a huge assumption, and that's you're going to double it every generation. Where'd you get that information? How do you know that's an accurate calculation?
Well, I mean, I don't see if they're having if you have 8 kids per couple, right? Even if half of them die, you're still doubling every generation.
But you're not looking at the actual reproductive rate of humans. There's almost no population on the earth that's doing that. No, nowhere. You don't double.
Would you agree? I guess, would you agree that people had more kids in the earlier times versus now?
They had more kids because the likelihood of all of them reaching adulthood was very small. You had to pop out 8 kids if you wanted to keep 2.
Are you familiar with Thomas Malthus? Have you ever read Thomas Malthus' book on population? It's about a 250-year-old book. You may not have heard of it.
I haven't.
Well, it's a very important book if you want to understand how population works. But let's just be real simple about it. How many pups does a dog have every time it reproduces?
I think if I remember right, it's about 4 the first time that they have kids.
Okay, well, there you go. Let's just say the dog had 4 pups. If you look at dogs, why aren't dogs overruling the world? Because they reproduce a lot more than we do.
Yeah, there is actually a lot more dogs today than there were 100 or 200 years ago. A lot more.
That's not my question. You espouse that doubling every generation. You just told me dogs don't just double; they quadruple every generation. So why aren't we overrun with dogs?
We kind of are. We have a lot of dogs in the Humane Society right now, and humans are smarter than dogs. Humans are the smartest mammal on the planet, so they have a longer likelihood of living. What's that?
RJ, I think you need to go back to school and study a little bit of math, study a little bit of biology. The amount of knowledge you're lacking here is astounding. And the main thing is population dynamics do not work the way you're saying at all. Nowhere close. Humans might reproduce at 1.2 times per generation, and that's under the best of circumstances.
I'd have to disagree with you on that.
I don't care if you agree or disagree. You don't have diddly squat for evidence, so it doesn't matter what your opinion is. It's not based in anything on fact.
I would say it is. I mean, I disagree, but
RJ, this is why it's useful to cite sources.
One thing I can't wrap my head around, though, is do you really think that we were around for 190,000 years and we didn't make a man-made structure, or we didn't, our population didn't get up to 10 million? Do you really think it took us that long to come up with a lot of these things? Do you think human beings, the writing system dates back to 5,000 years, and that's in
So RJ,
it took 190,000 years?
RJ, I want to answer your question with a question. Do you think you're the first person to think of this? Do you think that all of those scientists who dedicate their lives to this have somehow overlooked this? Or do you think that maybe you are not quite understanding what's going on here?
I do think they have overlooking it quite a bit. I do.
You realize that there are some pretty standard assumptions across countries, across continents, where scientists will come to these same conclusions. Do you think that this is a worldwide method knowledge here?
That's an argument from authority. That's the same argument that...
No, it's not an argument from authority. An argument from authority is only an argument from authority if they're not actually an authority on the subject.
So the majority of Christians rule the world, but they're all wrong. But the scientists who are not the majority of the world are the correct ones, even though there's a lot of scientists that disagree with the scientists you're referring to.
Okay, so first of all, Christians aren't the majority. Muslims are actually. But my point here is that either you think that all of the scientists are wrong and you have somehow come up with something that has been completely overlooked across the entire globe, or I'm suspecting, do you think there might be some kind of conspiracy happening here where everybody's agreed to lie about it for some reason? Like, either you think that the entirety of the scientific demographic is illiterate and incompetent, or you think there's part of a giant conspiracy. And both of those seem very far-fetched to me, especially if you're the one saying, well, it's just common sense.
I mean, I suppose you could make that argument, but I do think they overlook a lot of things. They've made lots of mistakes in the past.
How did we come up?
Scientists have not always been right.
Have you ever made mistakes, RJ?
No, here's my point, RJ. How did people figure out that scientific mistakes were made? Through science.
I would say evidence and testing things and evidence.
Right, so science. Science figures out when science makes a mistake. Not guesses,
I would say
not holy books.
Snails. The living snails was a mistake, though, right?
I'm going to have to look that up. But I would suggest that you do some looking up, too. And something I would suggest you look at is Viced Rhino's channel. So that's VICED Rhino, Rhino. He does a lot of coverage of exactly this kind of thing. He is a lot more knowledgeable about sources and the science behind it than we are. Also, if you think you've got something that completely rattles the entire scientific community to its core, I'm confused why you're coming to a show that explicitly says we're not scientists instead of going to actual scientists and presenting this, because you could get a fucking Nobel Prize, dude. Like, if you bring this up and realize that the entire scientific community has been mistaken for the entirety of its existence, you're going to get some pretty awesome cred. So I suggest maybe moving in that direction next time. They will ask for sources, though, so they're awarded.
Okay. You were asking for evidence, all right? And that's, you guys are asking for evidence, and then when a creationist presents evidence.
Ooh, wait. Evidence for what? What are we asking evidence for? God? Because we did not even touch that.
Yeah.
That is a whole other topic.
Yeah, God, yes.
Okay. Well, next time, call in and talk about God, because that's not what you did today. Even if evolution were proven false, the Christian God would still need to be proven. They are not the only options here. So,
what are the other options? Let's say for some weird reason I'm right, and the world is less than 7,000 years old. What other option could there possibly be?
Well, the Norse believe that the giant stone dwarves farted us into existence, or something like that. So why not that one?
And the Hindus believe it's millions and billions of years old. So that's another alternative.
The creationist myth makes more sense than that. And I think
it makes more sense to you, RJ. It makes more sense because it's the one you were brought up with. It's the one that seems familiar. It's the one that feels like common sense because it was presented that way to you. But it's actually, if you look at it, not by far the most realistic one. So I'm going to let you go for now.
I would say it is.
We do have other people on the line. But if you want to call back either with actual sources or maybe to talk about God, which is something we didn't do today, feel free to call in again.
All right, I'll let you go. I know you got a lot more callers. I will say thanks for being respectful. I called Matt, and that guy just hangs up on people. I know you guys work together and stuff, but you guys have been a lot more respectful, and you listen to my argument, and I appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Well, thanks for calling in. All right. Oh, thanks for coming in clutch there, Darrell. That was impressive. I like it.
My doctoral dissertation was actually on population issues.
Oh, so there we go.
I have a bit of expertise. It's kind of dated. I'm not going to say I'm up to speed on everything, but yeah.
Yeah, when you're calling in about something, make sure you at least have a couple sources and a couple numbers that you know are right. Because if you don't have either of those, chances of convincing people are going to go down quite a bit. All right, let's talk about another question for you, this time from a theist in Wisconsin. Jamie, hi, welcome to the show. How can we help you today?
Hi, thanks for talking with me. And then I can't see the doctor's name while I'm on the telephone. Was it Darrell?
Darrell, yeah.
What was your name?
Darrell.
Oh, okay. Hi, Darrell.
Hey.
So I'm calling in as a theist, and I am a creationist. I grew up as an atheist. I switched to being a Christian at about 27 years old. I grew up believing that Christians and stuff were probably rather dim-witted and believing all these silly things, but I did study it as much as I could and actually ended up switching to being a Christian from an atheist and from somebody who loved studying about science and biology and these types of things. What I'm calling for today is I've been trying to find out how our psychology, our brains, our instincts, and all these types of things can be encoded by DNA. I'm hoping we can have a discussion about it, not so much as an adversarial approach, but just kind of, people able to just look and wonder at how marvelous, we're built and things like that. So I tried to look online, and I can't find any real research or sources, and I think it's just because our science is so in its infancy of understanding how DNA works, to do some of these incredible things that the body is able to do. But like I say, the base of my call is just because you're a psychologist. Do you know of any, good science that shows how DNA can encode for the probably trillions and trillions of neuronal connections that create our psychology and how our brain works and all of these things?
Yeah, the research on this goes back a minimum of 100 years with early research on just watching the brain development of other animals. And what we saw in rats, mice, even worms, nematodes, is the development of the connections of neurons over time as the fetus or the animal develops in utero and later. So we've got a pretty good idea of how the brain connects the neurons, and then that's kind of level number one. It's just the biology, and we know that the DNA programs all that, and you can disrupt the DNA. If you disrupt the DNA, the neurons will not connect. You know, it's just like if I switch the light off, the lights go off. It's pretty simple. In DNA, when you talk about DNA, you have to really get down a little bit. It's not just DNA. DNA is the book that holds the instructions. And inside of that book are 22,000 or more instructions just for humans. And there's other every animal has a book of instructions. And if you tear one of those pages out for that instruction, mutate it, destroy it, that's a gene. And the gene is within the DNA. So I hope I'm not going too far off for you, but there's lots of ways to encode these things. And we know they encode in very specific ways because we've disrupted it. We've turned the light out and seen what happens. What happens when you turn off the serotonin gene? What happens? Well, serotonin stops being manufactured inside the brain of the organism. And oh, by the way, all mammals create serotonin just like we do. Does that answer a little bit of your question?
No. It kind of does. I think the understanding that DNA encodes for proteins is, we have a pretty good grasp on how that works. Mm-hmm. But what I'm not getting is how encoding for a protein can encode the patterns of neuronal connections to create these things that the brain's able to do. For instance, when any creature is born, it has to have and I don't think we even understand how the patterns create, how does the neuronal pattern create a thought or a memory or an instinct, I think as far as our understanding goes, we kind of know the region of the brain that does certain things. We know where the visual cortex is or the area of the brain that, produces speech, but I don't think we really understand how a certain, neuronal connection pattern can create, like I say, a thought, a memory, an instinct, these types of things. But when a creature is born, it has in its brain all of these centers that can do these things. It has a visual cortex that's pre-programmed. Humans have the ability for language and music and speech and, smells and all the muscle controls and the organ controls. And what my point is in order to create these things, we have more neuronal connections in our brain than there are leaves on all of the trees in North America. We're talking trillions and trillions of neuronal connections.
So, Jamie, I'm going to jump in here real quick because
I just got one last quick sentence on it. I'm sorry. What I can't find is any research on how just encoding a protein can possibly create these neuronal patterns. That's my question.
Okay, so I'm going to let Darrel talk about the actual process of creating neural pathways because that is definitely something he is more comfortable than I am talking about. My concern, though, is that we got this with RJ before and we're getting it with you now. The argument seems to be, I don't understand something, therefore I'm going to try and smuggle in a proposition that I think explains it. And that I want to cut to the chase here. I appreciate that you want to have just a conversation about it. I don't want to get aggressive. That's absolutely fine. But you're a theist, correct?
I am.
Okay, and you're calling into an atheist show that asks for proof or evidence of God, and you're talking about how it looks like. You use the phrase "built." We're built in this way, which I picked up on. Don't think that slid through. And you're presenting these things as if, I'm assuming, it's going to lead eventually to a God claim, and I'm concerned about that because that's not how it works. We don't get to say whether or not we understand exactly how neural pathways are made. We might not. Darrel will have to back me up on one or the other there. Regardless, even if we were like, you know what, it's a complete mystery. We have no idea how this happens. That does not get us any closer to a God claim at all, especially a specific God claim. So my question is, why are you calling in with this particularly? Is this what convinced you that there was a God?
The creation and the complexity of life was probably about a 50% factor that convinced me. The reason why I called in is I came across your channel today and I saw that you had a doctor psychologist on there, and I wasn't really thinking that we were calling in to make God claims with him. I thought it was more kind of discussing those types of, psychology. And I'm always more interested in the, physiological aspects of that. So that's why I called in. And I'm calling in, like I say, I prefaced it that I am a creationist or, a theist or a creationist, but I wasn't necessarily trying to make a convincing argument on that factor. I just recently, like I say, been trying to find any studies or science on how encoding DNA can actually come up with neuronal patterns for these, like I say, trillions and trillions of things. And I just can't come up with anything that I've been finding. I was wondering if he knew of some of the research on that more specifically, how that actually functions,
Okay, Darrel, how do you want to address?
Well, let me, I don't know if you're into construction. I build things occasionally. How do you get a roof on a house?
You hire a crew and they come and put the roof on. A lot of hard work and sweat and equity.
Okay, well, you left out a whole bunch of stuff there. First thing, you have to build a foundation. Then you have to frame up the house. Then you got to structure the house. So there's a whole lot of things that go in before you put the roof on. And what you came into the show and said, I want to understand how the roof got on there, but you haven't looked at all the previous developmental stages the organism had to go through before the neurons even started getting connected. So let's go straight to the roof. And if we go straight to the roof, I mean, assuming that there's got to be a lot of developmental stages an organism goes through before the brain even starts clicking.
But it seems like in most adult creatures, they have such similarities that there's a foundational structure that's built in. I will say built in to them when they're developing, an embryo. That stuff actually is encoded and created, encoded into it. We all kind of have, similar psychology. Otherwise, if it was just kind of like a random building out process as we develop it, we would just, I don't think we would have such similarities in our, psychology.
Almost like we're all related on some kind of tree that goes back to just a few organisms. Jamie, I appreciate you calling in, and I think that if this is something that is going to convince you one way or the other that a God exists, definitely worth doing more research on. I do want to make some room for callers who do want to talk specifically about the God claim. But if you do think you have a God claim that you'd like to discuss with us, feel free to call back next week.
And go find a good book on neuropsychology. You'll probably learn a lot.
Very good. Thank you.
Bye. All right. I actually love this format where people call in specifically to talk to our guest host because you have so much to offer, and I want to make sure we're platforming you as much as we can.
Well, thank you.
The thing here, though, guys, as we're moving through, this still is a show specifically about whether or not you've got proof of a God and what you believe and why. And so let's keep that at the forefront so we don't get too far off topic. But as always, happy to have an expert in subject matter that I particularly am not. Speaking of not being an expert in things, I did misspeak earlier. People called me out in the live chat. Islam is not the number one religion in the world, still is Christianity. The point was supposed to be that there were more of other religions than there was of Christianity. So if we're playing the population game, Christianity still is a disadvantage because about 69% of the world's religions are not Christian. But point taken, I misspoke. Thank you for calling that out. Let's talk to Jacob in California. Love it. We've got some theists today. Hi, Jacob. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. How are you?
Doing good. Happy to have Darrel on the call with us. So what can we help you with today?
Yes. I did not know that there was a different guest today, but yeah, that's been good to listen to so far. You guys have done a very good job. So anyway, I just wanted to clear up something from my last call. I was calling in talking about a Deuteronomy passage that talks about what happens to a convicted rapist, and then in a passage for a few verses down.
Oh, you're that Jacob.
Yes, I'm that Jacob. Yes, I figured you would remember once we got onto it. So I just wanted to clear something up real quick. I am not a rape apologist. I got called that by, I don't remember if it was one of you two exactly, but I seem to remember being called that, and then the whole Talk Heathen community was just going on about it. I am the exact opposite of that. My point of the whole call was to say that rape is not okay ever, and God doesn't think so either, because he condemns it with death. So anyway, just wanted to clear that up. If you want to talk about it, we can.
You don't want to talk about that with me. Let's move on to something else.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to clear that up. Not a rape apologist. I'm the exact opposite, and I think God condemns it with death is pretty clear. So anyway, moving on, though, to the other reason of the call was I've noticed this phenomenon, if you want to call it that, that atheists tend to call out confirmation bias and won't accept, Christian scholars on a lot of things, which is understandable. But then they're so willing to accept atheist scholars on things. They accept their own confirmation biases, but they call out Christian confirmation bias just left and right.
Okay, can you define confirmation bias for me in this way? Because I want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Okay, yeah, sure. So as I understand it, it's I believe something, and someone gives me a piece of evidence for it or something to support the thing I believe, and I believe it without necessarily checking if it's true or not.
Okay. So that sort of kind of. I'm actually in the middle of doing a video specifically on confirmation bias and cognitive biases in general on my own channel. That's in the works now. And there's some pretty interesting research that there is a lot of neurological reasons and evolutionary reasons why we have cognitive biases, and confirmation bias is one of those. So the reason a lot of people have confirmation bias is because when you are processing information in your brain, that's basically all your brain is an information processor, and it categorizes things, and it makes it easier for you to move through the world by telling you stories about things, right? And so confirmation bias is when your brain goes, oh, I already know this. I don't need to look at this. I'm filing this under okay, so that we can then move forward. And a lot of the time it makes sense, right? I say apple, you might think of a red apple. That's your brain making an assumption based on prior experience. You don't need to ask, V, wait, what kind of apple color are you talking about here? I need to double check this. It's okay. Your brain goes, oh, we know that, filing that away, moving forward, looking for something new and interesting. So everybody has confirmation bias, absolutely everyone. And you can do as much as you want and can, and you should, to remove confirmation bias from your research processes, especially if you're asking a question that might have an emotional component for you. But I don't think that it's useful to say one group or another does this more or less, because that seems like a pretty big generalization. So can you give me maybe a specific where you have maybe interacted with atheists who have done this? Is this a personal thing that you're thinking about, or just in general? Help me out here. Be a little more specific.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. It's a pretty broad generalization. Yeah. So I guess just in my personal life, yeah, and I have engaged with so this is not an attack on the Talk Heathen community before I say what I'm about to say, because there's some very good people that I've had some very good conversations with. Just a lot of the time, though, I was getting hit with these sort of cliche answers like, well, there's zero evidence for the Bible. And then I would present some and they would say, that's not evidence, such as manuscripts, dating within 30 years of the event and numbering more than 20,000, which is more than any other historical record, like Alexander the Great, for example. We have more evidence that Jesus walked the earth than Alexander the Great did. Stuff like that, and it would just get immediately dismissed. And so, yeah, it is just my personal encounters. I'm not really going to name drop because it wouldn't help any.
Right, and we don't want to encourage drama or tea on this channel as much as possible.
Sure, right.
Yeah, I think the thing here to keep in mind is that everyone does this, and I am calling out atheists left and right who do this as well, and so do a lot of other people in the ACA. So yes, you are going to come across some atheists who say there's no evidence, and then you present some evidence, and maybe it's bad evidence, but it's still evidence, right? And so instead of saying, oh, okay, well, I amend my statement, they double down, et cetera, et cetera. That happens. It happens in every conversation about every possible topic. My concern here.
Yeah, and just for the record too, I come across that in the Christian community, and I do the same thing. Just so we're clear, I don't tolerate it if someone believes what I believe either. If they say something crazy, I'm like, no, that's wrong. Let me show you why. So anyway.
No, exactly. It is a universal thing. So I guess my biggest question here is that why do we care? Is this a concern that?
Yeah, that's fair.
Like, yes, I agree. Everyone does that. Christians do it. Atheists do it.
And it sounds like you agree. So it's not much of a disagreement. And didn't mean to make it for a boring call, but it was something I had noticed. I wanted to see where your thoughts were on it. Sounds like you are far more honest about it than some I have come across. Some Christians too, right? So not just atheists, but so that's good. It's good that you're aware of it. I figured if anyone would be, it would be you guys, the hosts of the show here. So I just wanted to bring that up and maybe remind the community that's watching, just to check your answers, even if they're supporting your atheist claims, because there are PhDs and doctorates and people like Robert Jastrow, the former director of NASA and stuff like that, guys who are really, really smart, accredited, would be accepted as smart anywhere, who believe in Christ, who believe in God. And so not every single one of them can be nutbags.
Yeah, well,
So it's just good to double check your reasons.
Yes, I think we all agree. If you're going to be arguing something, make sure you check it if you can, and be willing to say you're wrong. I made a error on the show just a minute ago, and I self-corrected. That's okay, and it'll make people trust you more if you can self-correct. So yeah, I think we agree on that. Thanks for calling in, Jacob. All right. It was that Jacob, you guys.
Deuteronomy, Jacob.
Deuteronomy, Jacob. Yeah. So
I was ready to go there, but I'm glad you didn't.
No, I figured we'd keep the the niceties today. We don't need to get back into that. All right, let's talk with Amanda in the Netherlands. Amanda, you are on the air with V and Darrel. How can we help you today?
Hello. Hi. So I think it's better if I explain my background a little bit. I was born in Brazil, and they're super, super Christian. I was always in Catholic schools and very Christian background, almost to the point of brainwashing. And I didn't like that one bit. So I deconverted, and I was living my life and being fine with the notion that death is final and there is no experience after. But I had a few run-ins with death, a clinical death, and I had some frightening, horrifying near-death experiences. And since then, I've been very, very afraid of dying, and I felt like I was literally going to hell, almost, like my thoughts kept going on, although I was supposedly dead. And yeah, this has been shaking me up, and I also don't mean to be a downer, but I have, I'm not a healthy person, and I'm seeking end-of-life care. and I might choose for euthanasia, which is legal in my country, Netherlands. So, but this really scares me because I still have that fear of going to hell because suicide is punishable by hell and it's the worst hell. You know, I just can't get this out of my head.
Can I jump in there?
Yes, please, Darrel.
Briefly?
Yes.
Amanda, I'm sorry for your health issues. Those can just be difficult under any circumstances, but especially if you've gone through near death, that's pretty traumatizing.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw out a guess here, and I'm not here to diagnose you. I'm just throwing some ideas out. First of all, if you've had 2 different near-death experiences, I'd be pretty sure you've had some level of trauma. And when the brain is traumatized, it tries its best to adapt. But adapting to something so difficult as death itself, or serious illness or serious injury, is going to can permanently scar or change the brain. So what you're describing is difficult. And then you add to that something like religions are constantly telling us that we're going to hell and stuff. I do have one question. Are you afraid of going to the Muslim hell or the Hindu hell?
Definitely not.
Oh,
Muslim hell, no. Or
okay. So only
maybe
one.
the Buddhist hell. I don't know.
Okay. So you laughed. I'm curious, what made you laugh? I was serious.
Oh, well, because I was thinking about like what would be worse, the Muslim heaven or hell.
For you, the Muslim heaven might
bad.
be really bad. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Muslim heaven sounds to me more like hell for women and female types.
Yeah,
so,
it does. It really does.
I want to suggest you do a couple things. First of all, there's some great resources on the internet for fear of hell issues. And if you go to recoverfromreligion.org, hit the chat button and talk to one of our agents. They can connect you with all. You are not the first person that has this fear. And it's a pathological fear that's created by religion. A lot of different religions have learned how easy it is to control people if you just tell them they're going to some kind of hell, as we've already determined, Hindu hell or Muslim hell or Scientology hell. You know, every religion's, especially the patriarchal religions. The non-patriarchal religions aren't into that kind of thing. But patriarchal religions really want to, and they especially want to control women. So women are the ones going to hell more than men, that sort of stuff. So go to Recover from Religion and chat. They will connect you with some great resources that'll help you. And second, I would hope you'd find a good therapist. We actually have some therapists in the Netherlands from the Secular Therapy Project.
Ooh.
And just talk with them.
That's cool.
Yeah, you can go to seculartherapy.org and find somebody and see if you can work with them.
What was the name of the resource?
Seculartherapy.org. It's also on the lower third. If you watch this call back, you'll see the website on the screen as well.
And recoveringfromreligion.org as well. Yeah.
So the problem is not exactly about like the Christian hell is the only hell that I kind of know of basically. But my trouble with the near-death experience is like we don't know. Like ultimately, we're not exactly sure if consciousness goes on, right? Like we don't have proof that consciousness does not go on after death.
We have a pretty good idea of where consciousness comes from, and the consensus here so far is that it comes from functioning brains of sufficient complexity. It's an emergent property of having a complex brain structure, and that brain has to be alive in order to experience consciousness, because it's kind of like saying, well, water comes out of a faucet when the faucet is turned on. Right. And so once you turn the faucet off, no more water comes out. And so for the brain, for consciousness, it seems to be very similar, where it has to be on. You have to be alive in order to experience consciousness.
And like the weirdest thing is, actually, I am a psychologist, and I studied a lot about physiology and stuff, but it's like, I can't, I think it maybe is a trauma. Like I don't think too much about it. Like I'm like, wow, it's just what I've been brainwashed into. But I didn't really consider that not the experience of dying, like physically, but the mental experience of dying as trauma. But that might be a potential answer. But it's like, it is terrifying. Like nearly, like knowing that you have poor health, and like I had problems with my heart at the time, and knowing that, and then it just hits you. It is traumatic from the start and after. And even like, it's so crazy, because even with my background in psychology and me having kicked off religion for a very long time, it's still there. It's such a,
What languages do you speak, Amanda?
Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, English.
Okay. What language? What's
French.
What's the language of your family of origin where you actually grew up? Portuguese.
Portuguese. Yeah.
Okay. Now, when you were growing up in the family at 3 years old, did you ask your parents, "Why aren't you teaching me Chinese?"
No.
You didn't? Why didn't you?
I didn't even know, I think, Chinese existed.
Okay, well, there you go. So let me tell you why I'm asking that question. As a child, you were learning Portuguese at the same time as you were learning about Catholic hell or religious hell or Christian hell or other concepts. And those issues, when you were a child, your parents said, don't go play in the street because cars will run over you and kill you. They also said something like, don't go into this type of church because that's not truly a Christian church, or there's demons that live over there, or don't read these kinds of books because demons will come out. Right.
Definitely, they branded other religions as pagan and of the devil, and there was some widespread prejudice against like the natives.
Absolutely. So when you're growing up as a child, your brain absorbs whatever is around you, because if you don't, you'll die. Parent, as a child, you have to stay close and safe within your parents' protection. So when a parent says, don't do this or it'll kill you, you listen to them. As a child, that's a really good survival pattern. But as a child, you also don't know the difference between playing in the street and getting killed and playing with friends who are pagans and getting, quote, killed in hell. Your brain cannot distinguish. Yeah. And you're not sitting there saying, they really ought to be teaching me Chinese, or I really ought to be learning how to be a Buddhist. You're being programmed at the time your brain has no critical thinking skills. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the process, which happens somewhere around 12 or 13 years of age, it's really difficult to go back and reprogram that brain. Not impossible, but very difficult. And what I'm going to suggest to you is you are responding to childhood, some kind of childhood indoctrination that may have also been trauma. If you want to go and find out some more about that, go to this Centers for Disease Control, Google Centers for Disease Control, and then adverse childhood experiences. Just Google that, and you're going to find a little test. It has just a few questions. Take that test, and it may help you identify whether you experienced childhood trauma, and then you'll have to tie it back to the religion itself because the test doesn't talk about religion specifically. But I'm pretty, I would guess.
Definitely did.
Yeah, let's go do that. And find out, and do talk to a therapist. I think you've got you've got some potential to really grow and change and develop here, as if you'll learn what the trauma may have been and how to get around it.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you so much for the advice, and it's really good to talk to a psychologist because I think we kind of talk in the same language a little bit. So it really does, it is very helpful.
Good, thank you.
Good.
Glad to hear that.
Well, thank you so much for calling. Go ahead.
My boyfriend's a big fan of the show.
Okay.
I need to interject.
He needs to interject. He's here screaming at me.
Yeah. Hi, V, and Dr. Darrel. I just had to interject here because I know that Amanda is a very humble and shy soul, and she knows a lot more than she puts on here. And what I think she might be wanting to communicate is that when you go into an experience where you are on the border between life and death, it doesn't matter if it comes from a Christian or Muslim or Buddhist background, that realm seems to be there. It seems that is a place, at least as far as the mind is concerned, in the death process, right?
Well, we've got quite a bit of evidence around that, and it's related to anoxia and the fact that the brain is being starved of oxygen, and that can lead to hallucinations and other kinds of dream states. So there's actually been a number of studies around that.
Why does it do that?
I don't know.
I mean,
I'm not an expert in that area. I just know that there's been quite a bit of research around it.
Yeah, we're going to need to move on. We've got a couple more calls and only about 15, 20 minutes left of the show. But it's nice talking to you.
I'm sorry. I wanted to congratulate you on your complete smackdown of this tool who didn't know left from right. I'm sorry to say that, but I was like, please take our call instead. And thank you for your time. You're awesome. I love you.
Thank you, Dr. Darrel. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Thank you, you guys. Have a good rest of your day. All right. We are going to take a break and thank the top 5 patrons because I forgot to do that about 5-10 minutes ago. And then we've got 2 more calls to get through before the end of the show. You ready?
Yep.
All right. Let's refresh this page, see who these top 5 patrons are. All right. Today, the names of our top 5 patrons are Eric Tweet, Desert Heathen, Bethany P, Jay Friedwin, Ward Knipling, and I'm adding Dingleberry Jackal to the end there as well, Jackson, because why not? Thank you guys so much. You are the reason that we get to do this every week. It's your donations that keep us going. And to everybody who gives $1, $3, $5, you add up too. You are the backbone of all of this. So whatever you're contributing, we appreciate you. All right. Oh, we've only got one more. Someone else dropped. So let's jump on the line with Michael in, I believe that's Maryland.
Hi.
Hi, Michael. How can we help you
Michael?
today?
I am just delighted to speak with you. I'd like to bring you something entirely different from the tenor of the show so far.
Right.
I've been on hold since the very beginning. I mistakenly hung up trying to put you guys on speakerphone as I was listening.
Oh, no. Well, glad you're back on.
Let me speak. I can't even tell you guys I've been calling for months.
Okay, well,
in short, I'm not sure. I'd just like to mention that I'm kind of missing La Murph but I am very pleased to be talking with a good doctor. So I appreciate the guest appearance. I am a recently flowering anti-theist.
Okay.
And pretty much my question is, how can I be a more effective spokesman for science while simultaneously being a more friendly atheist? In other words, trying to convert the folks with honey rather than with vinegar.
Yeah, no, that is great. A good question, and something I've been pondering as well. So I guess my first question is, if you're trying to convert with honey rather than vinegar, why adopt the label anti-theist? Because to me, even if you mean it in a way that I agree with, to a lot of people, their ears perk up and they get defensive. So I'm curious how you define it and why you chose it.
Entirely understood and entirely appreciated. I will just add parenthetically that I have been so motivated by the lack of social support around this that I have gone so far as to start my own atheist, anti-theist, rational skeptic page on Facebook for the Boston area.
Okay, wonderful.
And it's only a week old and we're into the double digits and I feel like a new man.
Well, if you want to plug it, feel free to drop the link into our Facebook group for the Talk Heathen fan group, and hopefully we can get a couple more people.
Sitting in front of my computer. I only sitting in front of my computer, but I didn't want to feedback on you guys.
Appreciate that. All right, so why do you call yourself an anti-theist?
I will absolutely, because I feel as though someone who's rooted in theism is believing without evidence. As a rule, and this is directly anti-scientific. I am mad about making more people scientifically literate, both anti-theist, atheist, everybody. I think that is the bottom line, that everybody will be benefited by science and rational skepticism. My involvement with theism, I was born, baptized, confirmed. I was an altar boy. I went to Sunday school. I went to parochial school. I had to pray at night and in the morning and go to church at 5:45 a.m. and all that. And finally, by the 16, 17 area of my life, I had just had enough. I was so incensed at my own morality being dictated to me by the fact that my mother told me that I had no choice. I was born Catholic. I was obligated.
I've heard that from several Catholics that they're like, "Oh, you can't escape. This is who you are forever now." Like, thank you, appreciate that. So I'm gonna jump in here because I want to make sure we're having a back and forth and moving this along. Because I think the question is very interesting. My question is, I agree with you to an extent. I have since started thinking about whether or not anti-theist is a useful term for my purposes, regardless of whether or not I espouse those views, that inherently theism is anti-scientific to an extent. Does it make sense to call myself that if my goal is not to incite anger in the people I'm talking to? Because here's the thing. I understand where you're coming from. You are anti-theism, right? So you are against theism. Yes. So am I. I am 100% with you. But when I call myself an anti-theist, that sounds like I'm against people who believe in theism. I'm against actual individuals. And that's how it gets translated a lot. And that's actually very problematic in having useful conversations.
It is.
Yeah.
I consider my mentor Hitchens in a lot of ways. And he would probably espouse his anti-theism at the risk of
if you're
alienating.
Going the Hitchens route, like, here's the thing. If you're going the Hitchens route, take anti-theist and run with it, because that's exactly the way that he did things. But he also did not win militant. Right. He didn't win over with honey. So I think right now what you're saying is two very, very different goals, and they might conflict a little bit. So instead of, I do want to dive in a little bit more as well to calling out anti-science without, getting rid of your humanist viewpoint. And in a lot of ways, I'm reading this book now called Our Non-Christian Nation. And it talks about how to be allies with other religions and with other groups in order to be against the overreach of, right now in America, Christianity in government.
Separation of church and state.
Exactly.
Yes.
And you can be 100% allied with people in that goal, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to agree with them on everything, right? You can say, hey, we have fundamental disagreements here about other stuff. We agree on this issue. So let's band together and work towards a secular humanist viewpoint where all religions are equally tolerated, but none are, placed above the rest as kind of the required religion. And so for me, I think if that's the goal, using the term anti-theist might be a little difficult. It might be just setting you up for an extra hurdle you have to get over.
Yeah. Interesting.
That's
a lot of food for thought.
Michael, have you studied street epistemology?
Not. Is this a site or a person? Or I mean, that's basically been my sources, is you folks and Dillahunty and Hitchens and YouTube. But I'm trying to move on to actual spoken word reading books style, the sort of archaic method of acquiring information.
Well, I would give you
any suggestions are more than welcome.
Yes, I give you two suggestions. Go Google street epistemology and maybe Anthony Magnabosco.
Okay, I've seen it in passing.
Mm-hmm.
Watch some of the videos and learn deeply the technique and the technology. It's not easy to learn, but once you get it down, it's really interesting. It's very helpful, and it'll do exactly what you're talking about. The issue is, I said this in a post just this week, the issue is not to argue with people. The issue is to get them to think. And you can't get people to think if you put them on the defensive, which V has already noted. So stay away from terms and processes that put people on the defensive and stick with things that get the people to think. Good questioning, Socratic questioning, street epistemology. The second thing is, if you really want to help people, you can go to recoverfromreligion.org and hit the volunteer button. Because we will train you. We will train you how to ask those kind of questions, and you will help. You actually help people.
Yeah, I am jobless currently, and that's been another thing. I've been wondering how to give back, and how to be charitable, and how to ally myself with, perchance, charitable religious organizations. Because I'm more of a humanist than an anti-theist.
Right. Okay. And that's what I've been getting from you as well. I think that we're right on the same page with that. So I think if you want to go the route where you're firebrand, militant, Hitchens, anti-theist type, we need people like that. We need people who will come in and smack stuff down that needs to be smacked down. But if your goal is to give back and ally with religious groups who have shared goals, I don't know if anti-theist is the best term to use, at least not right now. Maybe we can rehabilitate it and use it in another way.
I would hope. And I will leave. I imagine you have some other business to wrap up. I'll try and be pithy, but what would you suggest as an alternate term?
Honestly, I'm a fan of good old atheists. Like, for me, not enough people just call themselves atheists. And that can be,
just flat out.
You can mean anything by that, really. You don't even need to mean woo, right? Skeptical.
This is kind of why I like it.
Exactly. And it here's the thing. So there are a lot of people, I'm going to get on my soapbox for a second because you had a good question, Michael. So here's the thing. A lot of people hear the term atheist community and they go, what do you mean? There's no atheist community. I don't have a community. There are no atheist communities, or even there shouldn't be an atheist community. The whole point is to get out of groupthink. With that, I agree. But I was reading this book a couple of years ago called Victory by Linda Hirschman, and it documented the gay civil rights movement from the 1940s until 2008 with Prop 8 in California. And it talked about how gay, lesbian, trans, bisexual, queer people joined together and decided very, very decisively, we are going to decide that we are a community. Not necessarily that we all have the same things in common or that we see each other, that we even know the other person exists. But if we're going to get anywhere socially, if we're going to get anywhere politically, we need to be a cohesive group. We need to have that backing of numbers and demographics in order to make our voices heard, because otherwise we're going to get picked off one by one. And it worked. And the reason we have come so far, not nearly far enough, but very far in such a short span of time, is because of that banding together in a political and social sense. So for me, I say atheist community in the same way I say the LGBTQ plus community. It's not that everybody has the same goals or the same agendas or the same viewpoints. They could be completely different in every other way. But if we have that shared goal and we decide to take a label and say, this is who I am, this is what I believe, then we automatically increase our power sociopolitically in order to be counted. So for me, I say just go with atheist and then add whatever else you want in there. Skeptic, secular humanist, free thinker, bright, if you like that term. But I'd say just plain old atheist is the way to go.
Okay, duly noted. I will reach out amongst the group for feedback sort of on this, because I've been wondering amongst the what little membership I have, what their sort of thoughts are. And so far I seem to be on the right track. That people want a dialogue. They don't want to just shut each other down, because that's not how anyone learns.
Exactly.
And I'm as interested in learning as in teaching. I mean, if not more so, because I'm no teacher. So
I love that. I think you're exactly on the right track. Feel free to visit our Facebook page and post the link. I'm sure people would be interested to check that out. And thank you for calling, Michael.
Oh, delighted to speak with you. True highlight of my month.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Feel free to call back.
I will.
Awesome. All right. That was all of the calls for this week, Darrel. Thank you so much. This was awesome. I loved this.
Well, I always enjoy it, and you and I have never had a chance to work together. Eric and I have. I find this quite refreshing. You're
likewise.
All right.
All right. All right. So a couple of things. Darrel, is there anything you want to pitch? I know we brought up recovering from religion a couple of times. You can go volunteer there. It's right there on that home screen. You get training. You also pair with, Secular Therapy Project. And you have, what you said, over
461 therapists now and 20,000 clients that are looking for therapists.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And these therapists have been vetted and they only deal in, proven scientific methods. So no woo. You don't need to worry about people coming at you with a religious interpretation of your mental illness. So yeah, that's awesome. Anything else you want to pitch while you're here?
Yeah, go look at my books. The God Virus is especially important right now in this time of COVID to find out how religions and real viruses work together to propagate. And my other book, Sex and God. Yep, either one of those. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Well, can we get the crew cam up here? Because we are not the only people who've been on the call this whole time. Look at those.
Whoa, look at all those faces.
The Lord of the Levels and his kitty master. All right. Let's throw some love rings up here, because I think I forgot them last time I hosted. So, this side. All right. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Fine. There we go. All right. So a reminder before we head out, Nonprofits will be airing at 3 p.m. Central Time. They have their own YouTube channel, so go check that out. We're going to be jumping in the Discord after to just have a couple minutes and talk with people. So if you want to check out our Discord, feel free to do that. You can find that at tiny.cc/ACA Discord, and we'll just be chilling there for a little bit after the show. And now it's time to thank everybody. So whether or not you believe, regardless of your position on God or religion or an afterlife, if you are out there doing the work that keeps this country or any country running, we thank you. We appreciate you. You are so important. You are essential. And this goes to everybody, including the people fighting wildfires on the West Coast and the therapists who are taking these calls every week virtually and moving their platforms online. This goes out to the protesters and the people who are out there deciding that, you know what, as harmful and as scary as this virus is, there is something far more harmful and scary out there that needs addressing. And that is white supremacy. And this is also for all of you who are going to the polls or mailing in on in your ballots or helping people find their polling place. If you are helping this country to vote, we appreciate you. And for those of you who don't believe, this is your community. The atheist community does exist. And in the case of the atheist community of Austin, it is a very real, tangible thing that we would love for you to be a part of. So come join us. And for those of you who do believe, we don't hate you. We just think you're wrong.